Good morning and welcome to today's UUCC Community Sunday service. Happy Dia de los Muertos and All Saints Day in the Christian tradition. My name is Bill Hevlin and I have the honor of acting as worship associate today. I want to extend a special welcome to our guests from Lake County today. Welcome if you're curious about our faith. Welcome if you've been here for the first time, if you've been here before, if you're a longtime member. Welcome whether you believe in God or a higher source, hold to humanist or secular teachings, if you come from another religion, or if you've always been Unitarian Universalist. Welcome if you follow NFL football or if you do not. Welcome to all. People of all skin tones, LGBTQ+, kids and mature folks, those with life challenges and those temporarily without such challenges. Here we are working to overcome our society's systemic biases, and you specifically are most welcome. UUCC follows the Touchstone monthly themes. This month's theme is spirituality. Today, Clovice Lewis Jr. speaks on spirituality for Unitarian Universalists. After the service today, I hope you stay on Zoom to join our usual random, smallish breakout groups that give us a chance to discuss thoughts from today's service. To that end, we'll post some prompts in the chat, or we can just say hi to each other and shoot the breeze. As a prelude, Clovice and his wife Carol will play an instrumental for us, Blue Boat Home. Thank you, Clovice and Carol. And thanks also to our singers, whom we'll hear later today, Linda Grace Frost, Tom Devine, Shauna Pickett-Gordon, and the others listed in our order of service. We want to acknowledge our first Sunday production team, music director Shauna Pickett-Gordon, artistic director Noreen Cooper-Hevlin, and our technical director, Bruce Raffnell. Thanks also to our sponsor, UU San Mateo, for administrative and professional support, and in particular to the Reverend Ben Myers, a consistent source of spiritual guidance for us. For financial donations to UUCC, we have options for both online and by check. For detailed instructions, see today's order of service or in the email announcing this service. By the way, the Church of the Larger Fellowship is hosting a post-election Zoom sessions this Tuesday and Wednesday. Details can be found among the announcements near the end of today's order of service. Join us on November 15th as Laurel Frischman shares how her form of spirituality can be found anywhere, easily. And if one connects on a soulful level, it can even be touched. Laurel's spiritual connection to nature, her higher power, and our seventh principle are all discussed in her sermon entitled, I in Awesome Wonder. That's 2 Sundays from now on the 15th. And now, Linda Grace will guide us in our opening hymn.
Please, everyone, rise in body and or spirit and sing our opening hymn, number 121, We'll Build a Land.
We'll build a land where we bind up the broken. We'll build a land where the captives go free, where the oil of gladness dissolves all mourning. Oh, we'll build a promised land that can be. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. We'll build a land where we bring the good tidings to all the afflicted and all those who mourn, and we'll give them garlands instead of ashes. Oh, we'll build a land where peace is born. Come, build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an ever-flowing stream. Come, build a land where the mantles of praises resound from spirits once faint and once weak, where like oaks of righteousness stand her people. Oh, come build the land that we seek. Come build a land where sisters and brothers, anointed by God, may then create peace, where justice shall roll down like waters, and peace like an
Good morning. I'm Clovice Lewis, and I'll be reading Listen, the Spirit is Calling by John Saxon. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It calls us in the silence and through the noise and busyness of our daily lives. It calls us in the brightness of the day and the darkness of the night, in times of hope and despair. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It doesn't matter what you call it, for it has no name, and it has many different names. The Spirit of life, the Spirit of love, the Spirit of compassion, the Spirit of hope, the Spirit of justice. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. It's calling to you and to me. It's calling us to greater wholeness, greater connection, greater service, greater love. It's calling us to heal the brokenness within ourselves, in others, and in the world. It's calling us to live more deeply. It's calling us to beauty. It's calling us to laugh and dance and sing. It's calling us to live through life's pain and sorrow. It's calling us to live courageously and kindly, to speak our truth in love, and to mend the moral arc of the universe towards justice. It's calling us into community. It's calling us into the greater life of all. Listen. Can you hear it? The Spirit is calling. And now Valerie and Ray, please lead us in lighting the chalice.
Please join us in reading these chalice lighting words from Anne Foster. Come we now out of the darkness of our unknowing and the dusk of our dreading and dreaming. Now we know from places, come we now into the twilight of our awakening and the reflection of our gathering. Come we now all together. We bring unilluminated our dark caves of doubting. We seek our bedazzled, looking for the clear light of understanding. May the sparks of our joining kindle our resolve, brighten our spirits, reflect our love, and unshadow our days. Come we now enter the dawning. And now let us consider our joys and concerns.
Thank you, Ray and Valerie. One of the ways we create our beloved community is by sharing our own joys and concerns with one another and finding support from our community. So now we invite you to click the chat button at the bottom of the middle of the Zoom screen. That will bring up a window in which you can type in your joys and concerns if you have not already emailed them to us. As you do so, Tom will play the Sarabande from Partita No. 1 by Bach. We also want to acknowledge the worldwide anguish of this pandemic and extend our gratitude to all essential workers. May they be safe. Many of us have concerns about the upcoming election, and we rejoice in the positive efforts of all who are helping get out the vote. We believe that democracy, a very Unitarian Universalist idea, can survive and thrive. Now, may we hold with love and care the joys and concerns that have been shared publicly today, as well as those that remain unspoken in the recesses of our hearts. In these times of reflection and renewal, let us remember that it is important to reach out to one another when we feel the need and to accept being reached out to. May we find comfort in knowing that we can share our joys and our concerns here among us. Tom now guides us in a moment of reflection.
Thank you, Bill. I'd like to read a poem by a 15th century ecstatic Indian poet named Kabir. This was translated originally by Rabindranath Tagore in the earliest part of the 20th century and was revised into more contemporary language by Robert Bly. In this poem, which is about something called, that Kabir calls the guest, you can think of the guest as what Reverend Clovice so eloquently called the spirit. Friend, hope for the guest while you are alive. Jump into experience while you are alive. Think and think while you are alive. What you call salvation belongs to the time before death. If you don't break your ropes while you're alive, do you think ghosts will do it after? The idea that the soul will rejoin with the ecstatic, that the soul will rejoin with the ecstatic just because the body is rotten, that is all fantasy. What is found now is found then. If you find nothing now, you will simply end up with an apartment in the city of death. If you make love with the divine now, in the next life, you will have the face of satisfied desire. So plunge into the truth. Find out who the teacher is. Believe in the great sound. Kabir says this: when the guest is being searched for, it is the intensity of the longing for the guest that does all the work. Look at me, and you will see a slave of that intensity. So now I invite you all to enter silence and search for the guest or the spirit inside yourself. And now let us extend blessings to each and all as we sing the meta chant together to a new version rendered by Carol and Clovice Lewis.
May I be safe, may I be well, may I know joy, may I be free, may you be safe, may you be well, may you know joy, may you be free, may they be safe. May they be well, may they know joy, may they be free, may we be safe, may we be well, may we know joy, may we be free, may all be safe, may all be well. May all know joy, may all be free.
And now, with great pleasure, I introduce our worship leader today, Clovice Lewis Jr. Clovice is a professional cellist and composer. He wrote his first symphony at the age of 17 and was a professor of computer music at UC Santa Barbara from 1978 to 1986. He has also been a serial entrepreneur and software designer for the past 30 years. In addition to music and technology, he has had a lifelong passion for aviation and has been a private pilot since 1987. Clovice is in the final stages of receiving his Master of Divinity to become a UU minister. His ministry emphasizes breaking down racial, class, and ethnic barriers and preaching the gospel of the madness of human self-extinction. Clovice.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate that very much. Spirituality for Unitarian Universalists sounds like an oxymoron, right? This is especially true when, according to the 1997 Needs and Aspirations Survey of more than 10,000 active members of the UUA about their theological perspective, 46% described themselves as humanists. 55% regarded themselves as earth or nature-centered, Buddhists, Hindu, undefined theists, New Agers, or pagan. Only about 9.5% described themselves as Christian of any kind, and 1.3% identified themselves as Jewish. In the decades since the Unitarians and the Universalists merged in 1961, the UUA has developed into a society of local congregations that focus mostly on liberal, social, gender-related, environmental, and political issues. And the influence of secular humanism is still strong, but it has waned with the rise of postmodernism. By now, many of you have probably heard the joke that UUs can never get through a hymn because they're always looking ahead to see if they agree with the next verse. Another one I like is this one. A Unitarian Universalist dies, and on the way to the afterlife encounters a fork in the road. The left path has a sign to heaven, and the right has a sign to a discussion about heaven. Without pausing, the UU turns right for the discussion. Indeed, these jokes are funny, but they hold within them a stinging kernel of truth about us. The truth is a very legitimate claim that we UUs are way too head-centered, too intellectual, too white, too liberal, too full of ourselves. And we're just not spiritual enough. And I'll tell you something. This is one reason why we can't seem to attract people of color. They have a hard time seeing that we are genuine. And we can't see the spiritual forest for the trees. In some UU congregations, fellowships, associations, communities, societies, or churches, the very mention of the word God causes apoplectic fits in some of our members. And I can tell you that in my small rural California congregation, we lost members when we first began to share a Methodist church building because they were opposed to both the building and to the cross in the chapel. And it didn't seem to matter that we transformed the chapel into a temple respectful of all religions every Sunday by putting symbols and banners on swivels so they could be easily turned around. But the prominence of the Christian cross, too heavy and too unwieldy to be easily dismounted, proved too great a psychic barrier for some. It's said that this rejection of God-related language and symbology is because many UUs are refugees recovering from Christianity. They've been deeply wounded by homophobia, racism, misogyny, biblical literalism, or even church authorities or dogma. UU minister Reverend Jordan Nelson Long wrote in a January 2013 blog entry. He said, "The aversion to all things Christian has been a much discussed and debated part of UU culture, overlapping with the humanist theist controversy, for what at least has been as long as I've been a UU. Having studied in a UU seminary with fellow students from throughout the UU spectrum, both geographically and theologically, I'm aware now that these issues are moving targets. Some congregations are very open to Christianity and theism. Maybe they've always were, maybe they've actively worked on becoming more pluralistic, or maybe new generations have caused a cultural shift. Some are still very predominantly humanist and proud of it. But I have a sense that is changing." Reverend Long accurately describes the humanist-theist controversy as a fluid feature of UU culture. And this is not necessarily bad. We UUs are uniquely situated from a theological perspective to embrace this kind of dichotomy. And I would argue that the third and fourth principles, respectively, bake into our DNA. Acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, and a free and responsible service. That said, it cannot be ignored that there is a constant tension between those two wings, if you will, of Unitarian Universalism. In fact, I think that individual UUs often embody that tension within themselves. And we must recognize that Christianity does not wound everybody. Some, having had mostly positive experiences in Christianity, leave it for more freedom to explore humanism, science, social justice, or just simply to think for themselves. And they might feel that Christianity is simply a subset of their overall beliefs. Doug Murder wrote about the tension many UUs live in with Christianity in an article published in the UU World magazine in 2008. He said, "One big reason I identify with Unitarian Universalism is because our religion struggles with its past. Unitarians and Universalists each started out as Protestant. They pushed Christianity's boundaries until they broke, and then, finding each other somewhere along the way, went on a spiritual journey through humanism, Buddhism, paganism, and a few isms that probably don't even have names. Now, two things are essential about Murder's observation. One, that Unitarian Universalism emerged from a Christian past. And two, that spirituality is not necessarily the same thing as the two separate denominations, Unitarians and Universalists, before they merged, owe their existence to theological responses against dominant Christian doctrine. And the belief in the Trinity of God for the historically older Unitarians was problematic. They believed in God as a single or unitary deity. On the other hand, Universalists rejected the Calvinistic doctrine of predestination, the salvation of some and not others. Universalists espoused a doctrine of universal reconciliation, the concept that all human beings will ultimately be saved and restored to a right relationship with God. The Unitarians and Universalists learned a long time ago to navigate these waters of religious ambiguity, especially as it relates to defining themselves in the cultures they inhabit. Long before elevators, they've always had to keep a 3-minute elevator speech ready, explaining why they're so radically different from others. So before we explain how spirituality is or should be incorporated more gracefully into UU life, let's agree on a definition of it. Now, for the sake of the humanist scientists among us, I call on Carl Sagan to define the topology before we go wading in too deeply. Here's what Carl Sagan said. Science is not only compatible with Christianity, with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality. When we recognize our place in an immensity of light years and in the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life, then that soaring feeling, that sense of elation and humility combined, is surely spiritual. So are our emotions in the presence of great art or music or literature, or the acts of exemplary selfless courage, such as those by Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. The notion that science and spirituality are somehow mutually exclusive does a service to both. But wait, please indulge me again in delaying a definition of spirituality by acknowledging the great giant of transcendentalists, Ralph Waldo Emerson. As early as the 1820s, his interest in Eastern religions led him far beyond the boundaries of the Christianity of his day. Long before most Westerners were aware of what it's like to be religiously cosmopolitan, he modeled the modern Unitarian Universalist. He was intimately familiar with Hindu Vedanti texts and the Bhagavad Gita, Rumi, and Confucius's writings. Were it not for the limitations of his day, his language and science of that time, I believe that Emerson's essays would fit very comfortably into the realm of modern quantum physics today. So now, to a definition of spirituality. According to Dr. Maya Spencer, a member of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, spirituality involves the recognition of a feeling or sense or belief that there is something greater than myself, something more to being human than sensory experience, and that the greater whole, of which we are part, is cosmic or divine in nature. Now, as a humanist scientist, I'm comfortable with that definition. I don't know about the cosmic or divine in nature ending of it, but I'm willing to split the difference and say that I experience the greater whole of which we are part is cosmic in nature. And when feeling generous and slightly giddy, I admit to a strong pantheistic tendency to see everything as divine. So there, I said it. A person like me can comfortably accept spirituality by the rhetorical jujitsu of enfolding the divine into everything that exists. So whether dealing with the macro level of the cosmos like Sagan did, or Emerson's contemplation of quantum-like Hindu philosophies, the underlying quest for a UU person grappling with spirituality is to explore the nature of reality. Understanding reality is the fundamental, it's the foundation for all philosophy, religion, and science. See, I imagine philosophy, religion, and science as silos, separated in a cornfield. Exploring the nature of reality requires combining ingredients from those silos. Now, some people are content to swim in, drink from, or just sip the contents of one silo. And they have found shrink-wrapped answers about the nature of reality, and they feel little desire to question or test those answers. We have to understand that silos, by their design, are constructed to contain their ingredients. They're built changing the contents of the silo, or even from leaving it. So now comes the Unitarian Universalist, who by their history, tradition, and individual natures do not want to be contained in any particular silo. They chafe at the rules, they're bruised by confinement, they're insulted by convention, they scoff at authority, and earnestly desire to explore their inner universe. Thank you very much. These dear souls consider all philosophy, religion, and science as a subset of their overall beliefs. Unlike the Gnostics that preceded them, UUs are focused on eradicating ignorance instead of eradicating sin, and on a direct experience of the divine instead of experiencing it through a religious structure. We see the wisdom in mixing ingredients from all the silos and valuing the flavors of all. UUs recognize that the silos are not the cornfield. However, most of us were not born in the cornfield, but in one of the silos. We were indoctrinated to believe that leaving the silo is to face ruin, oblivion, and spiritual death. Leaving would cast us into an ocean of meaninglessness without an anchor. Indeed, that has happened to some of us, at least for a while. I think it's time for many of us to discard the baggage and charge around the word spirituality and embrace it as a self-evident but mysterious fact of human existence. It is the cornfield's ground, if you will, that connects philosophy, religion, and science. And I contend that being a UU who is religiously wounded or blocked in this way is a waste of time and a waste of a precious resource. The 7 UU principles are, in my mind, a beautiful distillation of religious and spiritual wisdom that is perfectly suited for the modern mind and sensibilities. In addition, the living traditions of sources we draw from are also worthy of your consideration. The word spiritual is unapologetically contained in those principles and sources in a context that makes perfect sense. So I would urge you to get a hymnal or somehow go to the UU website. Take a look at those spiritual signposts that we have, the traditions, the sources, and the principles. Take a look. Unitarian Universalism offers the freedom to experience spirituality on our own terms, free from dogma or guilt. It gives us strange souls permission to start on the ground, exploring the nature of reality outside of the philosophical, religious, or scientific constraints that other people are bound by. This creedless religion you found yourself in is, for most, it's not a spiritual path, nor is it a substitute for one. However, it can be the foundation for opening yourself to a life-affirming and satisfying spiritual wholeness that Carl Sagan invites us to, which happens when we recognize our place in an immensity of years and in the passage of ages, when we grasp the intricacy, beauty, and subtlety of life. Namaste.
Thank you, Clovice. Thank you for your words, which give us pause and cause us to reflect in awe and wonder, and to step toward that wonder with kindness and hope. Listen, every good deed matters. Each small act of compassion, every smile to a stranger, every shout against injustice, each matters, however small. Because inside you, you shift. In your waking thoughts, in your nighttime memories, by bending toward justice, by moving with compassion, by breathing in life spirit, you become. You become not quite the same, and the world becomes also no longer quite the same. This community exists to encourage all those who gather here to grow spiritually, to grow more generous in spirit, and to grow by our actions more hopeful. And in doing so, to become no longer quite the same. So now we take an offering. This allows us to exercise that all-important generosity of spirit, an offering that supports the mission and service of UUCC, and for the generosity you displayed by being present here, and the generosity of all those who support this community with time, with talent, with treasure, with trust. We thank you all most profoundly. If your generous spirit moves you today, please feel free to contribute what you can to UUCC, either by check or online. Please follow the instructions in today's order of service. And if you are a first-time guest today, please allow the virtual basket to pass you by. While collections take place, let us take a few moments to hear Clovice and Carol Lewis play an instrumental version of The Oneness of Everything.
Hi, I'm Carol Cole Lewis, and this is Clovice Lewis from the Unitarian Universalist community of Lake County. And together we're going to perform hymn number 1052, The Oneness of Everything, in the Teal hymnal. This is a hymn with the words and music written by our good friend Jim Scott. And we're so privileged to be able to perform this for you today. Clovice will be performing this as a cello solo.
And now, let us dedicate these offerings by singing our UUCC hymn together.
We of the roadside, we care for our neighbors, seek for justice and sing for more peace. Open your heart and bring more love. We hope that we help and we grow here together, embracing and laughing in joy and delight in this world that we share, that we care for together.
And now, Ray and Valerie, please guide us in extinguishing the chalice.
Please join us in the extinguishing of the chalice by reading these words by Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. And now for the closing words.
In closing, I offer these words. Unlike a religion that might set a prescribed path or demand adherence to a creed, spirituality recognizes no master. A person engaged in a spiritual practice or way of life is free to enjoy the benefits of unencumbered gifts of the divine. Freedom is not a lack of responsibility. The UU principles and sources recognize a responsible search for truth and meaning. So relish the privilege of a spirit-filled life as it was meant to be experienced by free human beings. Go now in peace and renewed or newly found spirit until we meet again.
And now rise in body and or renewed or newfound spirit and prepare to clap and snap and dance and sing with me and the other singers. We are singing the closing hymn, Come Go With Me. Hit it, Tom.
Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. where I'm bound. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land. They'll be singing in that land where I'm bound.
This was a wonderful and very timely service today. Thank you, Clovice, for your inspirational words. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Linda Grace. The singers, Shauna, Valerie, and Ray, all of you for participating. Thank you for coming today. And I hope you'll be able to join us in the breakout rooms immediately following. We like the breakout rooms to be a safe place where we can talk openly and honestly about our topic today. And we want to remind people that what is said here stays here, but thoughts and concepts we learned and are inspired by can be shared. Once in the breakout room, please open your chat box. We'll be putting in some prompts to start the conversation. Please be thoughtful of the time that anyone who wishes to speak has the opportunity to do so. Here are a few things to consider for your discussion, but don't feel obliged to answer these questions, as these breakout rooms are intended to be a free-flowing and sharing of thoughts and sentiments, whatever they may be. Perhaps pick one topic that speaks to you to discuss with the group or not. One, do you believe it is important to study the world's religions? Two, do you believe atheists and agnostics actually practice a religion? Three, are UUs anti-spiritual? If so, why? If not, why not? In just a few minutes, I'll give everybody permission to unmute themselves. Have a wonderful and safe week.